having workforces that are diverse and focusing on equity and inclusion is so important. And that comes back to then links into safety.
It's time to down tools for a bit. Welcome to the ToolShed, the influential podcast for anyone and everyone involved in the building industry. Here's your host, Mick Hawes.
Hey there, before we kick off, I want to share a really important thought. 71% of you who watch this channel frequently don't subscribe. So if you've enjoyed any video you've ever watched, can you do me a favor and hit the subscribe button? It helps the channel more than you think, and the bigger the channel gets, the bigger the guests get. So let's go. Sometimes in business, there's a big difference between what you envisaged your business would look like and how it actually turned out. So there are many things that we think our business is going to give us that it doesn't deliver, and there are many things that we didn't think about that it does deliver, both good and bad. So in this episode, talking about turning problems into opportunities, Kym O'Leary has created a couple of businesses, one in particular out of necessity, and that's the true entrepreneurial spirit, is when you can see a problem and you don't even know whether you can come up with a solution, and potentially the solutions you're thinking of, aren't realistic solutions because you just don't have the resources, you just don't have the money. But necessity can often be the mother of invention, as the old saying goes. And so we're going to be unpacking that with Kym as well. Also, some ideas on what really are some of the most, if not the most powerful skill that you can have as a business owner and a leader that will contribute to the success of your business. We'll be unpacking that. Before we launch into this episode, I want to remind you that if you haven't done the Builders Freedom Readiness Scorecard, it's really a simple 2-minute exercise where you can answer some questions that will give you basically a report on the state of your nation, because you started your business thinking, I'm going to get more money, more time freedom, more choice being my own boss. More often than not, that doesn't happen. And quite often we see business owners just accepting that's the way it is. But it doesn't have to be that way, and there are some really simple, easy to do things that can make you far more ready, particularly from the neck up, to get more financial freedom and more time freedom. And it'll take you 2 minutes to answer some questions, and you'll get the report. But you'll also get some suggestions as to what you can do immediately based on your current situation. So click the link in the description, go ahead and do it, and enjoy the podcast. Hey folks, welcome to the ToolShed Podcast. In this episode, I'm speaking to Kym O'Leary, COgear. I know that we've had this a conversation very similar to this previously in the ToolShed, but this is an Australian company. I think the previous company we talked to was in the United States, but the problem is still the problem, and it's just wonderful that it's being addressed. So, Kym, you're in charge of COgear. Just before we hit the go button, there's another endeavour that we're going to talk about as well that came from a problem, and there were little to no funds to come up with the solution, and isn't that the entrepreneurial way, that your back's against the wall and you figure out the solution to a problem? So thanks firstly for being on the podcast. First question is, just tell us a little bit about the background story as to how COgear came into existence. There obviously was a problem that you were experiencing, and you just decided to do something about it.
For sure. So firstly, thanks for having me on today. I guess to go into understand me a bit more, I quit school when I was 15. I got a job in a local law firm in my hometown. I realised that I don't want to be doing that forever. Questioned my life decision and went back to school. So I've always kind of done things in a roundabout way. My path hasn't been straightforward right from the beginning. But when I came up with COgear, I was working at Foxley Mine in the Bowen Basin in central Queensland. I was a management accountant at that time, so it's quite a junior role. But my manager at the time was pregnant, and Steph was about to go on to maternity leave. Foxley was a small site. We didn't have, a big team. So I was asked to come along to a few of these meetings, sit in the back corner and use it as a learning opportunity. Try and answer the questions that were being asked of the commercial team in my head and take notes so I could get prepared for when I was in those meetings solo. But what I noticed is I sat down in the back corner and about 7 men were in this room. They all sat around the table really comfortably in their workwear. And there was Steph, 7.5 months pregnant, wearing an open hi-vis shirt, a singlet on underneath. And then the conversation got going is, how do we attract more women into the resource sector? And I just sat there quietly and I thought about it and answered to myself. I was like, how about we start by providing workwear that fits women at all life stages? So, I jotted that down in my notebook and went home that night and just was trying to buy Steph some workwear to finish out her time pre-baby, and I couldn't find anything, and that was globally. So that's when I just slept on that for the night, and I woke up and I'd always wanted to have my own business and sort of had the realization that, I'm not just going to wake up one day and have it. I've actually got to create this business. So I thought this was the perfect time to merge two things that I loved, which was the resource sector. I really enjoyed working in mining, and then my interest for fashion. I thought I could combine them and make my dream career. So that's how it all got started.
Yeah, it's a quite a common story, that there's just things that people just walk past, don't see them as problems, and they just remain problems. And it takes somebody to sort of put it on the table and say, hey, what if we did this? But there's obviously a bunch more benefits for a business, and we've had so many conversations with women in business and women in construction and so forth. We've had so many guests on the podcast where we've unpacked this idea that most businesses are missing out on a terrific opportunity when they don't have females on the team in a traditionally male-dominated industry or type of business. And looking at these sorts of issues just makes it a few steps simpler and easier. So it's obvious that there is a comfort issue or a discomfort issue with standard issue workwear and all the good high-vis stuff and what have you. But is there also a safety concern as well?
I think you hit the nail on the head, Mick, about, missed opportunities with women, but it's not just women. I think that's the beauty of having a diverse workforce. When you mix age, you mix culture, you mix gender, it's that diverse thought process. Like why COgear worked and why I noticed it was I had an interest in fashion. So if I didn't have that interest, it wouldn't have been overly obvious to me that there was a gap. So I think that's why having workforces that are diverse and focusing on, equity and inclusion is so important. And that comes back to then links into safety, that we need all people to put up their hand when they notice something that, can be improved or flag something or say, like, there's been a story on this particular team had a diverse background and someone was really passionate about dust. So they took on that project where there was other members of that team that weren't interested. So it's about having, a unique bunch of people around the table from unique backgrounds and age and gender to be able to identify the gaps.
One of the other things I mentioned it in the intro, and I got the pronunciation of it wrong, obviously. That's my specialty, getting pronunciations incorrect.
Me too.
Another offshoot of COgear came about again through a problem. It's called HEMS Design, HMZ Design. And well, I you've explained it to me, so I understand it, but I think you'd be far better off telling the story about why this happened. And like, it just sounds like, why didn't I think of that? Like, when you explain it, I'm sure people will have that. That makes a whole lot of sense. Why didn't we think of that earlier? So, tell us the HEMS story.
Yeah, sure. So that just come from COgear. I was asked by one of our main customers, our major customers, Kym, we love COgear. Now you need to bring it out in different leg length options. Just like men's pants come in regular, tall and short lengths, you need to offer that in your women's range. And I listened to them say this, and in the back of my head, I was just like, this is impossible. I'm a small business, all cash flow supported by me. I can't do this. But anyway, I didn't say no at that point in time. I instead acknowledged the problem and said I'd try and help fix it. But deep down, I thought it was impossible. But I got off the phone and, just got on with my day. Honestly, I didn't give it a second thought. And it wasn't until I got home that night and I was telling my husband, Stu, about what I'd been asked. And I just said, I don't think I can solve this. And Stu's like, Kym, let's just, fire up the barbecue, chuck some steaks on, crack a bottle of red wine and just forget about the day. And I'm like, yep, sounds like a great idea. And, one bottle probably turned into a bit more than one bottle. And
to get the thinking juices flowing.
Yeah, exactly. But we weren't even talking about work. So it was brilliant. And then Stu, just out of the blue, said to me, Kym, have you ever opened a bag of grain? And I'm like, yeah, like a bag of chook feed. And, I grew up in North Queensland with animals and chooks and, so I'd done my fair share. And I said, why? And he's like, well, you know how you open it? If you pull it one way, it comes undone really easily. If you open it the other way, it jams up. He said, can't you just put that mechanism on a pair of pants? I'm like, Stu, if it was that easy, someone would have done it before. And, and I was like, oh, come on, let's stop talking about work. And anyway, got up the next morning and I couldn't get this thought out of my head. So I started drawing and writing things down. I'm a very visual person. And then I sort of had this realization, I think this could actually work. So I called an IP lawyer and, explained what I was trying to do. And we got the ball rolling. I got a provisional patent, which meant I could share my idea with the factory. And we had 12 months to get it up and running and the idea was protected. But absolutely, I had that, if this was that easy, definitely somebody else would be doing it. But I think it was just, I was completely desperate. I had no money, so I had to think outside the box. And it was my biggest customer asking, so I wanted to deliver. But we eventually got there.
Yeah, that's amazing. And there's so many things going on in my mind about that. Is the first thing, because I'm all about mindset. Everything that we do in Black Belt and all I really ever talk about is mindset stuff in there. And you're even saying to yourself, I don't think I can solve this. And isn't it funny how sometimes, like, you've put the input in here, that the problem's inserted into the computer, and then you have steaks and wine and talk about something else.
Exactly.
And you get the solution. And it's it's just very, very entrepreneurial. And then the other part of it that stimulated the thought was, I'm sure you've heard of Mike Michalowicz, the author of Profit First. He's got 11 or 12 books out now, and his very first book was called the Toilet Paper Entrepreneur. And you obviously haven't read it, but you live it. You know, through that story, you're exactly what he's writing about. But he's a good mate of mine now. I met him through the podcast when he put out Pumpkin Plan, and then he came back on the podcast when he released Profit First. But the very first book I read was this Toilet Paper Entrepreneur, and the whole intro of it is talking about how when our back's against the wall, we come up with these creative solutions, except the reason that it's called the Toilet Paper Entrepreneur was the example that he gives, that you're in the public toilet stuck in a cubicle and there's no toilet paper and you've got to come up with a solution. And I won't go into the detail of the solutions that he thought about because it's hilarious.
Sounds like a good read.
It is. He's a funny guy with a lot of great ideas, but it's how we need to be, and of course you can fix things by throwing money at it, but I just love that whole entrepreneurial spirit where we haven't got any. So
Exactly.
we've got to figure out a whole workaround. So I'm interested in learning about your learning also. So there's a big difference between the vision of what a business will look like when you first come up with the thought, and you're talking to your husband probably over more steaks and wine, and you go, I got this idea for a business, and it's a very romantic notion, and you know that you're going to be needing to work hard and all of that sort of stuff. But as a rule, there are hurdles and problems that you didn't expect when you started to build your business. You just didn't see it coming. Can you think of any of those that you can walk us through? What didn't you expect? How did it show up? And what lesson did you learn from it?
Firstly, I can think of so many.
Let's do them in alphabetical order.
Yeah. Well, I think the first one that really sprung to mind instantly was at the very, very early days of COgear. The plan was for me to be behind the scenes. I've got a background in accounting and, hated being on camera, hated talking, very introverted by nature. So I wanted to be behind the scenes and no one even knew I existed. And that is the wildest thought now looking back that I could have had, because, you turn into the salesperson, you're the face of it, you're the story, you're absolutely everything. So to think that I could just run a business and start a business and not talk to anyone is unbelievable to think that crossed my mind. But that's honestly how I thought.
You're just going to be sitting in the back of a warehouse, taking orders in the dark, just with a desk lamp, posting them through a hole in the wall or something.
Yeah, just, people don't even know you're here. The orders will just come and it will just happen. Like if you invest in the stock, obviously it would sell. And that probably brings me to the second big lesson was, because I'd been working in mining, I'd saved and I'd invested in an investment property. And, I'd paid a little bit off it. So I thought I'd use that money to buy initial stock. And that initial stock never sold, because even though I knew the problem that I was trying to solve, I didn't ask for anyone's feedback. I didn't get anyone pregnant to try on the shirt. I just assumed I had all of the answers, which again, it's just so naive. You just don't know what you don't know. And it was a very tough lesson, but yeah, I lost a fair bit of money for that, and I've still got some of the stock left over. It's here as a constant reminder to get input and feedback and keep wanting to improve. But that was a really hard lesson.
Yeah. And you just used that word there, it's something that we talk about with our guys all of the time, is that you make mistakes, it costs you money, you lose money, and you can get the shits about it and get on with things. Or the way I prefer to look at it is I just paid for a lesson, and I don't know how many thousands or tens of thousands of dollars it was, but
Exactly.
If you look at it from the perspective, if you went for a weekend or a week, depending on how much money you've lost, a week or a weekend seminar to learn something, and you paid that amount of money, you'd want to learn something. Like, you'd want to have massive notes and implement, like, see some very, very measurable shifts from what you learned from that lesson. And I think it's really important for all of us as entrepreneurial mindsets is to understand that things aren't going to go right. They are going to cost us, and we do need to not just learn the lessons. And in fact, in Black Belt, we have on a Friday session, we talk about gains and learnings rather than wins and lessons, because when you start to think about wins, well, what's the opposite on the ledger of that? It's lose or losses, and that's not helpful. You just sort of talk about, well, what gain did I make? What progress did I make? And then the learnings rather than a lesson, because lesson is information. Learning is have invested that information into something practical, so it works. The other thing too, and you can sort of maybe unpack this, how you got over it. You mentioned that you were an introvert. From my perspective, introverts make some of the best leaders and some of the best sales people, because they're just not over the top. Like, they don't cause overwhelm in people. It's like, yeah, that makes sense. Let's do it, and they'll follow you, and it just doesn't seem like a sales presentation when it's coming from an introvert. So it's a lot more effective. So how did you get over that? Like, when you found out that you weren't at the back of the warehouse under a single beam of light posting things through a hole in the wall, and you actually had to speak to people, how did you get over it?
I think it was leaning into my strengths. Like, as a kid at school, I never got good marks. Like, I passed, and I was a good student, as in I was quiet and did my work and did what I was asked, sort of thing. But my comments every year were, Kym tries really hard and she's a good listener. Like, and to me, all I wanted my report card to say was, Kym is really smart and has a bright future. So, I think I reflected on that, and I know I'm a good listener, but I really didn't realize that would be the key to being able to grow businesses. But now I've really lent into that, and I class it as probably my strongest strength is, actually hearing what people say and listening to what they want, and then acknowledging if I don't know, but being willing to find a solution. So I think it's been a really interesting journey on figuring out who I am. And now that I know who I am, or I'm getting a better understanding of who I am, it's not being embarrassed or, scared to get up and talk to people, because I know I'll mix my words up. That's just who I am. And I know I'm not a great speller, and I know, I won't have the quickest response time. Like, I can't be one of those witty people that, can fire back with something. It's just not who I am. I'll listen to it, and I'll sit in the car by myself and, sing some songs, and, something will happen and I'll figure out a solution. So it's just being kind with myself and understanding how I like working, and don't worry about who I'm not, worry about who I am, and lean into those strengths.
Yeah. You mentioned, most important skill I wrote down here, and I can't help but agree with you that I personally think that, effective level 5 listening, like from the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People type stuff, that real empathetic listening and paying attention to the emotion as well as the content and feeding that back without judgment and all of those sorts of things. To me, it's the single most important skill a business owner / leader could have, because people listen to those who listen to them, and isn't that what you need your team to do? And so often, and I'm using air quotes for the people that are just listening to the audio only version, that leaders think that the quickest way between, from point A to point B is to tell. And maybe there's times for that, don't touch that hot plate, you'll burn yourself, that sort of thing. But when you're building teams and you're trying to create accountability and have people really feel like they're appreciated and validated within a team, I don't think that there's anything more powerful than listening skills. And if they feel heard and genuinely listened to, not just through repeating it back, but seeing things being implemented that maybe they've suggested in a conversation, things like that, it can be just so powerful. So, and the other thing that you mentioned, you're not the quickest in responding, and that's such a superpower that people seem to think that, if I can reply really quickly, people will think I'm smart or whatever. But one of the best things you can do is go and just leave a big gap there, because,
That's right.
there's a thing called the Japanese silent pause I learned many, many years ago, and it just means that when you're really wanting to understand somebody and have them feel like they've understood, even if you haven't got all of these skills, you can just implement this idea, which means that you leave like 2 seconds of airspace once they've finished talking before you talk. Because, you know what it's like when somebody talks over the top of you, particularly if you're trying to unpack a problem with them and they stop you halfway and go, let me stop you there. I know what you need to do. And it's like, but you haven't heard the whole thing and there's no way you could have processed it and what have you. But yeah, I just think it's an amazing superpower. You also mentioned about, you talked about finding out who you are, and I just want your thoughts on the importance that you place on, or you believe we should place on, our mindset and what we put into our mind, our beliefs. What part do you think that plays in the success of a business, rather than just going to business school and knowing numbers and, following the technical stuff? How important is it to work on your thinking and your mindset?
Yeah, that's an interesting question, because I don't think I've done a great deal of formally doing that.
Yeah.
But I know in the early days when, sales weren't great and I was questioning, giving it up, and, basically I did give it up and then I came back, but that's another story. But I do remember there was times where I forced myself to go to the movies by myself and ask myself questions like, what is my favorite color? What is my favorite number? Like, to me, answering these questions was figuring out who I was. And they sound really, really easy, but now when someone asks me what's my favorite number, I've got a really quick response. Like it's all
Here's
these
one I
little
prepared
things.
earlier.
Yeah, that's right. It's 7, if anyone's wondering.
Everyone's a 7.
Well, that's mine, and my favorite color is green. And I think it's these little things that seem, I had no clue why I was doing it at the beginning, but I just didn't know where to even begin. So it was just, going to a cafe and going for breakfast by yourself. And, this was before the time that you could just flip open your phone and be occupied or watch TV or put your headphones on. Like, this was when you actually just had to sit there and maybe talk to someone in the chair next to you, sort of thing. So it was just forcing me to push myself, because that for an introvert I think is quite challenging. But I made myself do it, and I acknowledged that it was going to be hard, and I might think that it's a bit weird, but I really do think that's the stuff now that I just, it was important to do.
It's I don't know too many people like you, and I'm going to put you in the category of freak of nature. So wear it like a badge of honour, because there's only two other people that I've ever come across that have really never on purpose done any mindset stuff, any business acumen, really committed themselves to working on understanding business acumen and all of that sort of stuff, who have built a business and they just have this innate ability to be able to somehow know that there are certain things you must prioritise. Listening was one, and this other one is thinking time, like just going and sitting in a quiet place, without phones, without computers, and just ponder. Like, it's so powerful, and it's something that I endeavour to teach our people, and they go, really? Like, really, I should do that?
Yeah, I actually credit my mum and dad for a lot of that sort of stuff. Like, we grew up on a little farm and we had mango trees, and once we finished the work that had to be done, we'd go fishing. And fishing is very calm. You're in nature.
Yeah.
You're just waiting for something to grab your line. But it's kind of like, there was no music. There was just, you'd look in the water, you'd relax, you'd breathe, you'd talk to one another. Like, it was quite calming.
Yeah.
And not having the buzzing of technology, or it was just a different time. But I know now my nieces and nephews and my son, and we still do the fishing. We're moving back to the coast, to a small town, because I want my son to grow up, go to school, and then chuck his bag in the house and grab his fishing line and go outside. Like, you've got to calm yourself.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, versus here is a tablet. And I don't mean a tablet that you take. I meant one or both, or it could be anything. But going fishing is a much better option than either of those two tablet options. So, I love that. I just wanted to thank you for putting the time aside to be on the podcast. I find it fascinating. I really love meeting people that are genuinely contributing to the betterment of the construction industry, and they've kind of, I'm going to say, dedicated their life to making a contribution. That's what we're trying to do on the podcast, is just finding people like yourself and helping to make others around the joint more aware of what you're doing, because the construction, particularly the building industry, needs a lot of help. There's a lot of unnecessary stress, a lot of unnecessary pain. There's all sorts of mental illness. There's incredible suicide rates, all of that sort of stuff. And everything that you've spoken about today contributes in a significantly positive way to helping that. So I just really appreciate your efforts and being generous with your time to come onto the podcast. Final question. What can we expect in the future? Have you got anything just sort of simmering? Are there any more discussions over steak and wine that need to be had with your husband?
I think many. That's the real answer. But no, we're packing up our life. We're moving into a caravan next year, and we're traveling Australia. So it's that sweet spot before my son starts school, and we want to just go and enjoy life and make some memories. And with Starlink these days, we can work from anywhere. So I plan to keep working, but in a new way.
Well, that sounds a bit exciting. So I really hope you enjoy it. I hope we stay in touch, and any new, that come from the mixture of meat and wine in the evening near the water, perhaps fishing, and you're getting those ideas and making them come into reality, let us know so we can get you back and have a conversation about what's going on. So really appreciate you being on the show.
Sounds great. And thank you for having me and inviting me on. It's been great chatting.
Pleasure. So there you go, folks. All of the links to check out the HEMS, that's how you pronounce it, HMZ, and COgear are going to be in the description for this. So make sure you go in and check it out and support businesses that are really doing a wonderful job of contributing to the betterment of the building industry or the construction industry. So I hope you enjoyed that. We'll be back with another episode before you know it. I'm Mick Hawes from Builders Business Black Belt. That is all. I'm out. Bye for now.
You've been listening to the ToolShed. If this podcast struck a chord with you, make sure you spread the word by sharing it with your mates in the building industry. We love your help to make the building industry better for everyone involved.